Hey everyone, here's a very quick video of the very first Spanish lesson for our class explaining basic greetings. So basic ways to say hello, how are you, and say goodbye. So the first word, a lot of you might know, hola. Hola is how you say hello in Spanish. One thing to pay attention to, the letter H does not make any sound. Pretend it's not there. And after you say hello, you very often will ask, how are you? In Spanish, you say, ¿Cómo estás? How are you? And then, of course, you want to have different ways to respond. Maybe you're doing well. Then you would say, bien. If you're not doing so well, like the poor girl in crutches in the picture, you would say, mal, bad. And the other question there with the letter Y, the letter Y by itself is actually the word and in Spanish. So that's those two words. It's pronounced y, tú, means and you. I would probably write in my notes something that reminds me, how do I pronounce that? You might need to go back and listen to that again because the letters are a little bit different in Spanish. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bien. ¿Y tú? Mal. And here on the right, we have a couple more examples of ways to ask, how are you? This one is super common. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? It's just another way of asking, how are you? It's best not to think about, what does que mean? What does tal mean? Just remember, oh, ¿qué tal? How are you? And the last one, not used in every country. I've actually never heard anyone say it, but I think it's used commonly in Mexico. ¿Qué pasa? This means what's happening. A little bit more casual, informal. Notice in the picture, it's a couple of friends that are greeting each other, and it's not a super formal situation. The next one, hasta luego. Now we're talking about how to say goodbye. So hasta luego, see you later. Technically means until later, but it's better to think of it as see you later. Remember that the H, pretend it's not there, it's silent. Another very common way to say goodbye in Spanish, adios, adios. And focusing on the words in blue, when the man says goodbye, he says adios, señorita. Señorita means miss. Usually this is definitely used for a woman and usually someone who's a little bit younger, kind of like in English we have the difference between miss and Mrs. Señorita would be miss. Pay close attention to that N with the squiggly line over it. That's called an ñ. In Spanish, you have to pretend there's like an invisible letter Y after it. So you would not pronounce it like a hard N sound. You have to pretend there's a Y there. Señorita, señorita. Definitely write that down. Some other ways to say hello. Often you might greet someone and say, hey, good morning. To say good morning, you would say buenos días. The next word, señora. It looks a little bit like the word we just saw, señorita. Señora means ma'am. So ma'am or Mrs., like we would have in English. So again, this is for a woman, but a slightly older or slightly more professional woman. The next line, ¿Cómo está usted? In Spanish, when you are being very formal with someone, maybe you're in a business meeting, maybe you are speaking to someone who's older than you and you want to show respect, the principal of your school, who knows? You have to change how you speak in order to speak formally. So notice how it's very similar to what we saw earlier, ¿Cómo estás? But now it says, ¿Cómo está usted? Usted means you, just like the word tú that we saw earlier. However, usted is the fancy way of saying it. And also notice the word está. How is that different from earlier when we said ¿Cómo estás? Hopefully you notice now there's no S. So it's just a way of speaking fancy. If you take away the S sound and you say usted, it makes it sound formal. And her response is, regular. Looks a lot like the word regular in English, but it's pronounced differently. It's just kind of meaning, yeah, I'm normal, fine. And then she asks, ¿y usted? It's the same as ¿y tú? but now it's just the formal way of saying it. Tú is informal, usted is formal. And Señor Martinez says, más o menos. That's another way of saying, I'm doing so-so, I'm all right. I'm not good, I'm not bad. I'm just normal, I'm fine. Más o menos literally means more or less. The next one, buenas tardes. This is how you could greet someone in the afternoon, to say good afternoon. Buenas tardes. And Esteban's answer there is muy bien, because he's not just good, he is very good. So bien means technically well or good. Muy bien, very good, very well. And then finally, buenas noches. This is funny because it has two meanings. It could be good evening or good night. You can say this as you greet someone and also as you say goodbye. And then next we have hasta mañana. Notice again the N with the squiggly line. Makes the Y sound, mañana. Hasta mañana, señor. Hasta mañana means see you tomorrow. And señor means sir or mister. Okay. And there's a couple extra terms to say goodbye. A lot of times people say ciao, nos vemos, and maybe instead of regular, if you're just wanting to say más o menos, you might instead say normal. And remember, there's a difference between usted and tú. One's informal, one's formal, and the letter H is silent in Spanish.